Hello, my name is Kurt Sutter, and you are here with me today. Solo. My lovely wife is traveling, and this will be man pie today. Pie is our homecast, people, influences, and experiences. And where we kind of, dive into things that perhaps some folks might not know about our guests. And I have to say that if there was ever a guest that was worthy of man pie, it just sounds so awful, excuse me, is my guest today, our guest today, Mr. Ryan Hurst.
Oh, bless you.
Ryan!
Thank you. Bless you, sir. Yes.
This is a bit surreal, man.
Yes, I know, isn't it?
It's
Isn't
so
it?
weird. Because we have conversations like this all the time.
Yeah.
So I am just a little current update in terms of why we are sitting here. We are in Calgary. And this is news that everyone has already, if they care to explore. But that Ryan is in the new show we're doing called The Abandons, and he plays a character named Miles Alderton, and so it has been. It's been kind of wild.
It totally has.
I mean, clearly a different world and a different character, but to be in another ensemble, high intensity ensemble drama with you again is a mix of surreal and just really quite fabulous. So I thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Today.
I was just reminiscing about literally, like, I was in my bedroom and I just done my meditation and yoga and stuff, and I get a text from you, and it was just, "Hey, want to join my rodeo?" And I was like, "Oh, here we go." I hadn't read the script or anything. And I think I texted back, like, as long as I get to knock out a cow, and then I sent you a Blazing Saddles clip. But I was like, oh man. But I knew it from the get-go. I got those, those chills. I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then I remember talking with Michael Ornstein, real, like once we were up here.
Right.
I was like, and I still feel this way. I was like, it feels more surreal. It feels more like a dream than anything else. I was like, I had this dream that you and me were doing this Kurt show, but it was kind of a Western drama. We were in Canada. It sounds more like the ingredients of a dream than anything. So it's a blast. This has been phenomenal.
I have to catch up with Mikey, man.
Yeah,
Mikey, the story with Michael. He's one of my oldest friends.
Yeah.
I've known him. If not my oldest friend, I've known him since I was 21 and he was 19.
Where you guys met? Where?
We met in an acting class in New York.
Yep.
We were in a Meisner class together, and it's really it's so crazy, and he we were just, and it's so like I remember introducing him to Katey. We were in New York. We were looking at some of his art. He had it in a storage space, and his daughter Angelina was just born, and we were expecting Esme was on the way, and now Esme and Angelina are discussing their colleges.
Yeah.
It's like, right? But it's and then to have him back and he's got a small role as he always begins in a smaller role, because I know eventually
that he's gonna snake his way in there.
He'll end up becoming the glue of the mythology, like he was in Sons. And he's and he looks amazing. Like his beard,
he's more beard now than man.
It's so crazy, and man. But yeah, so for me, surrounding myself, quite honestly, with with people I love and feel safe with is half the game at this point.
Have to. When you guys like first met, like, do you remember what you guys sort of initially like vibed over?
We were both, we're both incredibly impulsive and obsessive. And it's so funny. His girlfriend at the time, my friend Alana Levine, who has her own podcast, Katey and I've done her podcast. Katey did her podcast. We saw her in New York, and the three of us would like hang out and talk, reminiscing with her. And it's this weird, like, wasn't that yesterday?
Right.
And yet it's a different, it's like a different dimension.
Yeah.
And yet not, right?
Yeah.
And but we just. Michael's energy for someone who is, as controlling as I am, and Michael's energy was like, let's do this.
Yeah. And
there was something about it. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like he was just an interesting yin to my yang.
Yeah.
So we just, and at times it was maybe, a bit out of hand.
Sure.
But no, I and we just loved the work. We were, we both loved being artists. We were those annoying, listening to Waits and we were those guys.
Yeah.
But dude, no, it's so amazing having you on here.
Thanks for having me.
What we do here, and the reason Kate and I started doing this was, I have no friends, so
Same here.
I have a small circle, and we see people, and whether and look, we're in the business, so a lot of times it's people of note, and it's like, oh, that person looks really cool, or that couple we should get to know them. Mm-hmm. And then we basically were like, well, let's have a podcast so we can invite them to the house.
Right.
And basically, get to know them, to know them, with
that's
ad
a good
revenue.
idea.
So, so it's really what how it
put some aside for the college fund while we're making while we're locking people in an elevator and saying we're friends now. I love it. I'm the same way.
I don't do that to people. I was like, Kate was on the plane with Ewan McGregor, and they were chatting, and they were coming back from like a con thing, and he had never done one, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is great!"
Yeah.
And I just said, "Tell Ewan, let's be friends." Tell him I love motorcycles, right? And she's telling him all this, and I'm sure he's like, "Yeah, that's lovely."
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. I remember this was years ago. I was in a Coen Brothers movie, The Lady Killers, but at the time, like leading up to that, I was editing something. I don't even remember what it was, but I was like, editing for like a long time, and I had the School of Rock, the Jack Black DVD, and it was just sort of like on a TV playing over and over again as I was editing for like 3 weeks or whatever, and then I go to the premiere. And because I was just it was such a cute movie. He was so charming in it, and I go to the premiere for the Lady Killers movie, and I go out in the middle of the movie to to get some more popcorn or go to the bathroom, and I'm getting some popcorn, and Jack Black comes up, and I turn around and I just go, and he goes, "Hey, you're in this," and I go, I have the School of Rock DVD. And he looked at me and he goes, "Thanks for your patronage." And then I sort of walked away, and I was like, "God damn it, we could have been best friends."
Good. Well, at least you didn't quote the movie.
Right. Just the quote right back at him.
Yeah, that would be disconcerting. Oh man, but here's what we like to do on this is that, look, we know obviously you for your work and But what we try to do is kind of dig a little bit to get to know, like, basically how in growing up and in your past, how you basically what form, and I will stop saying the word basically. Jesus Christ. You'd think, I may know a few words here and there. What were the choices along the way that led you to who it is we know today?
Got it, okay.
Right? So to dive into that, now I know a little bit about how you grew up in terms of who your dad was, but I'm not. Give me the 411 on some of that.
So Dad was an actor, and my mother has been an acting coach for 50 years.
Oh wow!
Never an actress, always a teacher, and real early on, I wanted to be an actor, and they deliberately kept me out of the business.
Where was this? Where did you grow up?
Santa Monica.
Oh wow! I didn't know that.
Yeah. Santa Monica.
Wow.
Yep. And so they were like, "Yo, you got to be a kid."
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like,
right.
and I was very thankful for that. But I sort of grew up in my mother's class more than anything else. Is I would just, when I was done from school, I would just go to her class and do my homework in the back and watch her do what she was doing. And it wasn't until I was probably, my mid-20s, like late 20s, that I started to see that she was really sort of the Eric Clapton, like she was so soft-handed, and it was masterful to watch what she was doing. So many acting teachers a lot of the time just try to like drill a certain system down their throat because they know that it'll systematically improve to some degree, but she was just masterful. And I didn't really realize that until I was a bit older, that I was just like, I remember I was sitting in the back of her class and watching some people come in who were just terrible.
Right.
Just terrible. And I was like asking myself, like, well, what would I do to even, start to direct this in the right direction? And I wasn't. And she would just do these little sort of almost magic tricks with them to get them out of their head, to get them coming from instinct, to playing the scene, listening, like all of the stuff. And so that's where a large percentage of my training came from. Outside of that,
right.
My life has been.
Wait, now, did you have siblings? Did you have,
Yeah, I have. So I have 3 half brothers,
okay.
All younger. 2 on my mom's side and 1 on my dad's side.
Now, did they come into the marriage? So they got married with kids from other marriages?
My mom and dad got divorced when I was 1.
Okay.
And then I essentially just lived with my mom, and I would see my dad every once in a while.
Your dad's the actor.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then they both like almost immediately remarried,
right.
and started families then.
I see.
So, but none of my brothers are really in the business.
Right.
My youngest brother, the one on my dad's side, is an actor. Is very, very skilled comedian. Very, very. His name is Colin. And we're probably the most alike out of all of the brothers.
Right.
But but that's where it's all sort of started. But outside of that, there was one other main influence. And again, like my life has been peppered with these things that seem like they're out of a movie because they just make no fucking sense. But in high school, I had a mentor named Dr. Frank Ford, and he was the man who ran the drama department. But he had taught at USC. He had taught film and drama for 25 years, and then left USC and came to teach at a fucking high school.
Wow.
And so he was.
Is this in Santa Monica?
Yeah, yeah, at Santa Monica High School. Wow. And so he was literally like an Alexandria library of fucking information. This guy was phenomenally well educated, and he was a fantastic teacher. And like, if anything, you know, when it comes to when I commit myself to something, I can be a great student. It's like when I find a teacher who I see doesn't have their sort of ego wrapped up in it, and that I trust them. I'm just empty cup. Mm-hmm. You fill it. I'll just show up. Just let me learn. And he saw that real early on, that I was like, you know, when I would do a performance that I didn't even want to hear what worked. I would just go, if it worked, great. Just tell me the stuff that sucked. Tell me where I can get better. Right. That's all that I need to know. And you know, this is when I was 13 or 14, and so he kind of leaned into that. So he started teaching me, really took me under his wing, and was an enormous creative father figure. Right. But here's the weird part was, so you know, he has 2 doctorates. That's why everybody called him Doc. Right. So I guess it was my sophomore year in high school or something like that. There was like a back to school night, you know, where all the parents show up. And my dad said, "Oh, you know, let me come to this one." My dad like never would come to those things. Yeah. So I was like, "All right." So, you know, go classroom to classroom. And we go into the drama department. My dad walks in there and he looks at Doc, and Doc looks at him, and they both howl with laughter, run up to each other. My dad picks him up, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? and so unbeknownst to me so my dad, back in the early 80s, when he was doing a lot of acting, did like the game show circuit.
Right.
And he was on a $25,000 pyramid or $50,000 pyramid.
Whatever, right.
So Dr. Ford, just being this wildly, you know, an IQ of 200 and whatever, you know, this did the game show circuit too. They won the $50,000 pyramid together. So here's the funny part: the $50,000 that Dr. Ford won on that paid for his tuition, that actually made him into a doctor. So it was just one of those
holy shit, that's crazy.
So, and like the like cherry on top was maybe 4 weeks, maybe a month, you know, a month after that had happened. I was just kind of like, oh God, they knew each other. That's cool. I'd come home from school and I turned on the TV. This is back when, and I turn on the TV, comes up to the moment of them winning.
Oh, like on the game show channel?
On the game show channel. And I was like, I literally thought I was asleep. I was like, and no one else was there. I was like, so, yeah.
Let me just slide back on that just a second. In that because your mom remarried as well, mm-hmm. right? So you had a stepdad, mm-hmm. and you know if they were keeping, or they were sort of trying to protect your childhood, if you will. Yeah. Now, your dad being the actor, was, once you were in that pursuit, did that relationship shift at all? Was he? And look, I mean, in terms of like, you know, the things that push us in those directions, or that turn the page, if you will. Mm-hmm. What, you know, how did that necessarily play out, or was he just really not part of it? And then, you know, as we do, we learn you sort of navigate around it. Mm-hmm. But you know, because I too was, you know, I love my dad, but there was no. I learned at an early age that that's not where I went to feel good, right?
Right.
So I was always sort of looking on some level for that comrade, that brother, that, you know, I was raised by women, and you know, and whether it wasn't even necessarily a father figure, it was just a male counterpart, you know.
You're telling my story, right? That's exactly my experience. Is my mother's going to laugh when she hears this. She would always say, like, when you were younger, you would find any coach, mentor,
Right.
and just gravitate towards them.
Right.
Is my dad was in a lot of ways, for good or for bad, was kind of Uncle Dad. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Is and how he played into it, like my decision to act or not. It wasn't really there. It was like if I was in a play, and especially if it was a comedy, and I was working on a bit or whatever, I would go like, "You got any?" I would say like, "You got any bits for this?" Like, what do you And he would offer something funny, and I would take that. But it wasn't. There was never like I'm doing this to make him proud or to make him jealous.
Right.
It was just sort of, which is kind of the best scenario.
Now, in as far as the disconnect of it, and yet not from a place of needing to get away, other than it's just not there.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly right.
But
at the same time, there was, and to a large degree, it's still there. The echoes of it is still there. Is that want of a teacher or a big brother or a male figure that you felt like, come hell or high water, you could always rely on.
Right.
And that never really went away. I do remember having this epiphany. I remember in high school. I remember I was sitting in social studies class, and this thing came to me. I was like angry at him about something. Like we were supposed to have lunch and he canceled or whatever, and I was just kind of like ruminating in my head of like, I fucking hated that he does this. I hated that he does that. And I was like, and it was like some future version of me whispering in my own ear was just like, you don't want him to be those things. You want to be those things. So go be those things. I was like, oh. And all of a sudden, any responsibility that I put onto him for making me feel a certain way, I just sort of reclaimed.
Right.
As I went like, I don't want him, to teach me those things. I want to be taught those things. And so I sort of reclaimed that responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think, it's always it's one of those things like when I look at my own journey and it was wholly circuitous, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately led me to the place I was supposed to go, and sometimes I would think like, oh fuck, if only I had gotten whatever sober sooner, if I had done blah blah blah, and then what I've realized is that the long road that I perceived as wrong turns or whatever was, even when I wasn't aware, was feeding me some emotional data, some life data that for some reason either I needed or I needed to bounce off of. And had I been on the so-called right path,
you wouldn't have learned those
I would have learned those things or had those experiences. And look, some of them probably, the learning was things that I've ultimately had, you have to overcome.
Yeah.
But it's it's a lesson nonetheless.
Yeah.
So do you think when you look back at that, because now I understand the influence in terms of the artistry of being an actor, like that I know you to be, and the influence of your mom. So when you sort of left that when it was time to sort of step out on your own, what were the things that allowed you to sort of make that step, like that next move?
Yeah, that was the hardest, the hardest fucking thing was, I only, at the end of high school, it all happened. And it was a precursor to the way that, you know, when shit hits the fan in my life, it kind of showed me, look, when shit hits the fan, it's all going to hit the fan. So just get used to this. You know, every 11 years, things are going to fucking fall apart. But I was 17 years old. It was at the last semester of high school. And I knew that I only wanted to go to NYU, USC, or Juilliard. Those were the only places that I felt, because essentially what I wanted to do was get in there to the theater schools and then sort of
be in a conservatory program. Yeah.
But then make my way into the film school.
Right.
Was always the big idea. And NYU and USC both accepted me. The theater schools accepted me, but the colleges rejected me. Is my grades were so shitty.
Right.
And I tried as hard as I could. Is the principal, the vice principal, the superintendent all wrote letters of recommendation going, don't look at this guy's grades. Just and the theater schools all went and appealed it back to the school, and they said, we're still not taking him.
Right.
So it just was not in the cards. So I was like, fuck. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So me and one of my good friends at the time were going to move in together. So I was making all these plans of moving in with him. And then he goes, out of nowhere, and I've known this guy since third grade. And he goes, I can't move in with you. I go, why? He goes, I just can't move in with you. Why not? Just like close to best friend material, just disappears. I was like, okay. In the same week, my mother goes, the bank is foreclosing on our house. And I go, okay, shit. And she goes, we're moving here. And I go, well, where am I going? She goes, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? She's like, oh, and your stepfather and I are getting a divorce.
Holy shit.
And I was like, okay.
You didn't see any of that coming.
No. Then I'm like, okay. At the same time, my dad says, your stepmother and I, we're getting divorced. I said, okay, all right. So
is there a family meeting I missed?
I was like, what the fuck is going on? I was just kind of like stepping back and watching this. And then so I had to go out and find a bachelor apartment and
at 17.
At 17, and rent it, and it was something out of, you know, it's like something out of a movie. Was
in LA.
Yeah. It was so it was like a non-sanctioned bachelor apartment. Is one of the walls was part of a carport, a one-car carport. So when the guy would start his car, the wall would shake.
Right.
The other wall was to the laundry room. The other wall was to the trash chute. And so the fourth wall was the main walkway for the entire rest of the building. So there was just people walking by there the entire time. No kitchen, you know, just a bathroom and a hot plate. So I moved in there and struggled and was just like, you know.
You were like waiting tables? What were you?
I had booked my first. This is the funny part of the story. So I booked my first 2 commercials, and one of them, my very first job, was a Spam commercial. and it was Spam, and it was Spam's first commercial. It was like their first national commercial.
Wow.
And they ran it for like 3 years. So it kept me alive.
Wow, that's amazing.
It kept me alive.
And Spam kept me alive.
And so I lived by, but still literally every single month, because I was late, I was getting, you know, eviction notices on my door and I was writing bad checks for pizzas, you know. I was doing everything that I could to stay alive. And then maybe a year and a half into that, out of nowhere, I booked my first series on USA, which was this goofy sort of Animal House style comedy called Campus Cops.
Oh, wow.
And John Landis was the executive producer, showrunner, and director. And And but I still remember, you know, we only did one season,
Right.
but I remember it was like one of those, still one of the strangest things was all the network executives, you know, because it was like me and one other guy was the two lead guys on the show, and they got us all together, and it was like Mr. Hollywood, like the USA executives just wanted to let you guys know you're going to be stars. And we were like, and you know, I'm like 19 and the other guy's like 19. We're like, we're going to be stars. Cool. It was like so weird.
You go home to your hot plate and your vibrating walls.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. But I do remember, you know, again, there's these things, these sprinkled in little things. But what I do remember was this. I'm forgetting the actor's name. He was in Magnolia. He's an older guy, character actor, sort of one of those journeyman sort of character actors, who he's like this small little white-haired character actor, beautiful voice. He was in Magnolia, played the guy who's at the bar, Ben. Gosh, I'll have to look him up. But as I was testing for that show. I was sitting outside, like running lines to myself. And again, it was like, then there was a bench out there, and I was sitting there running the lines. And he comes and he sits next to me like a fucking leprechaun, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Are you here for an audition?" I said, "Yeah, they're doing my test." And he goes, he just kind of like looks at me and stares at me. He's like really quiet, and he goes, "You got nothing to worry about." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And he goes, "No, I mean that." He said, "I know these things, and you're going to go really far in this business." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And he's like, "You're welcome." Got up and left. I was like, you know, when the universe shows up in that way, it's like so affirming. But yeah.
And that ran a season. Yeah. So that kept you alive.
Yep.
All right. But you're pretty much, and now where is in like all of that? Because you're still a kid, man.
Yeah,
like I think I'm, you know, like I think of, you know, my kid's 17. I'm thinking, no, that I had, you know, what would that, you know? And look, I guess you've obviously you figure it out.
Yeah.
But when that went down, like where you know, like your dad was sort of a bit of a satellite, it sounds like, but your mom was the you know, was quote unquote home.
Yeah.
And where did she move to, and where did that was you know, where was that reach and all that?
Yeah. So my mom has always been there.
Right.
With both of them, never has it been financial. Right. I remember asking my dad, like, when there was eviction notices I was like, "There's eviction notices. Like, can I borrow $50?" And he goes, "Hang in there." I was like, "All right." I always remember like that Indiana Jones line when he's just like, "You sent me away." He was like, "I was teaching you self-reliance." Like, all right. But yeah, mom was always there. But at that point, she moved into a one-bedroom apartment. Both my brothers were sleeping, you know, in the bedroom. She was sleeping on the couch. She slept on the couch for 6 years. Wow. So my mother...
Still teaching.
Yeah, still teaching. But my stepfather was totally out of the equation then. So she was a single mother, you know, raising the two of them. And legitimately... and it's so nice for me because I know this now and my brothers know this now, and I remember hearing it a lot from her students. They were like, "Your mother is a fucking angel." And you know, you're 16 and you're like, "Well, yeah, you don't know."
Yeah, you don't know my mom.
and then but she's just a bottomless well of support and like joyful enthusiasm with just enough, you know, just as much wisdom to be able to back it up.
Right.
She's always, regardless of the circumstances, she's just sort of unshakable. Right. Regardless of what the fuck goes down, it's always like, Okay. And that has been enormous in my life. It kind of put a ceiling on my, like, my tendency to go too fucking crazy. It's like when you had one parent that was like, even if the fucking world is ending, we're not going to totally lose our shit. Is she really helped me navigate that space, that even when you have eviction notices, even when everything is falling apart, is, guess what, on some spiritual level, you knew what you were signing up for when you came into this life. And you decided to learn it through these challenges, this circumstance, so let's just keep moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so then your career starts.
Yep.
You're on your own.
Yep.
And then you did continuously work from that point on, right?
Yep. It's I never had a regular job. I've been, when I like look back at my career, and the amount of luck is just astounding. Is right after that movie, a couple months later, I got my first feature, which was like, 6 months with, it was a Kevin Costner movie called The Postman. It was like $300 million sort of, ended up not doing very well, but, but I just have continuously worked. Was there a point where you look at something and go, as and then I want to get to other stuff, but on this trajectory, do you look at something that a particular job, or in those early periods that you felt not necessarily change your trajectory because of success or whatever, but took you to that next place in terms of characters you might be portraying or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Was there any particular project that you felt like, oh, now I'm going this way, or? Not so much. It's kind of always been a bit the same for me, which is like, I always try to take a character that I feel like has the room for some type of depth that another actor might not be able to provide. It's like, there's lots of roles that I've sort of turned down because I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm taking a job away from somebody else, where it's just like, so-and-so can do this job and they'll be fucking perfect. And then I try to look for the ones where, very much like Opie was like, that there's a kind of, there's, the caliber of the thing is wider, and I go, no, I don't know that everybody can do this. I can do this. I kind of gravitate towards those, regardless of the genre, regardless of whether it's TV, movie, or whatever. I kind of fall into those spaces. But I remember when I did Remember the Titans. I remember my agent sent me the script and I read it, and I turned it down, and she was like, reread it. And I was like, I reread it, and she's like, and I turned it down again, and she goes, why? And I was like, it's like an after school special, like what? And I said, who's directing it? And she said, Boaz Yakin. And I was like, what? Yeah, Boaz had directed one of my favorite movies called Fresh, which is about this like 11-year-old crack dealer who, and loved some of the narrative stuff that he'd done in there, some of the, conventions that he put in there. And I was like, Boaz Yakin is making this thing. I was like, no, let me go in there and try to do it. But for whatever reason, and I don't say this from like a self-important way, but I remember when I was flying to go do that movie, I was on the plane with one of the other actors, and I don't know, we were just talking, and I was just like, yeah, finally feel like I can kind of offer something to this movie. And the other actor was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, and he goes, aren't you just happy to be working? And I kind of went, I've just always felt like I know that I'm going to work. It's
Right,
like,
right.
it's just like, that was like never a question. Is like, if I kind of keep showing up and doing my job and devoting as much as I can to it, that the universe will provide, that it'll be there. And he was just like, Jesus Christ, but I found that real early, and it made me feel more content and less like I had something to prove or whatever, that I was just kind of like, is because like a lot of times when I look at my life and I go, okay, like take acting out of it, is at the end of the day, it's like, it's a job, and whatever the job is, I want to be able to do it as best that I fucking can.
Right.
And that's all that's important to me. I remember when I was like in like 5th grade and 6th grade is I had all these posters on my wall of, it's funny to think about it, but it's like it was like Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Gandhi, Malcolm X, and it was all these people, and I just knew that this, regardless of what they were doing, that they were living a life that was attempting greatness.
Right.
That there was a quality of greatness to whatever it was that they were doing. And not that I try to, not that I'm capable of that type of greatness, but it's like in its own capacity, regardless of whether it's acting or whatever, it's just like, let me, I'm here on this planet for a minute. Let me devote myself to this and do this as best that I can, whether it's being a husband, a father, right. An actor, is I love to assuage, and, sort of abolish any neuroses or egotism that I have inside myself through devoting to the process. It's like going into the process is serving the thing, whatever the thing is like a fucking vacation in my head.
Oh, that's interesting. Here's what one of the things just to shift gears for a second, is that, like, I know when I bring you into a project, and that there is a level of commitment and a surge of intellectualism that I will not receive from any other actor, right? And I know, and well, let me finish. Yeah. I know, I know you'll have ideas, right? And what I love about working with you is that we have the relationship now where, you can come to me with these ideas and these tweaks, if you will. And look, I have a sense of mythology, but backstories initially, for many reasons, one being just not having the brain space, but also seeing who these people become, that sort of reverse engineer to a certain extent what backstory is, right? So I tend to leave backstory. There's a structure, but it's not necessarily finished, right? Yeah. So you can build from it, and have enough. And a lot of with you, a lot of times you'll give me pieces that I'll go, oh, that works, boom, boom, boom. But I can also say to you, like you understand when you come with me with an idea, I'll be like, no, we don't want to do that, and because I know that will take him in a direction that won't allow me to bend him this way, right? Yeah, totally. And because you are you are constantly in process. Yeah. Some of the challenge for actors, especially in a serialized drama, on a show like this, where mostly out of circumstances, I'm chasing scripts, right? Yeah. But the beauty of it is I get to see elements happen before my eyes and go, oh, that's interesting. And it gives me the luxury, if you will, of bending things, right? Yeah. And going, oh, now it's this, and a lot of actors, they will feel that and they'll be like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that, and how, but like in life, as things occur, it's like, rather than I can't do that because I'm this.
Right.
What I love about you is, like, the initial hit of it, you're like, oh, and then like I'll just see this fucking light go on, and it'll be like, oh, I'm that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm that.
Yeah.
And understanding the fucking magic of that, like now, oh, that's something people didn't know about me that I didn't know as an actor, but now I get to go that way.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not like, it's never something that flies in the face of shit you've been doing.
Right.
It's just a turn or an awareness. And that's what I love, is that we can have, I'll get 50 emails from you, and I'll be like, that's nuts. He can't do that. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Is he that?
Right.
Oh, he is that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'll check that one and send it back to you. And
but see, and that's what I love about working with you, is like, because a lot of the times is when an actor comes with a lot of ideas, which is like a showrunner's fucking nightmare, which is like, it just is. Just like, oh, you've got ideas, great. But it's like, is that, for me, a lot of it it really is all sort of like grist for the mill. The way that I think about it in my head, like when you're walking along the street and somebody tries to hand you a pamphlet, and they hand you a pamphlet, and it's like they're saying, here, you throw this away. It's like that's where a lot of my things are. It's just kind of like, they're living here, throw them away. I don't care. Right. It's like, if they work for you, great. If they don't, but just don't let them live in my fucking head anymore. I don't have any stock in any of these things. I just don't want them anymore.
I like that. I'm going to use that line next time someone hands me a pamphlet.
Oh, you want me to throw this away?
I'll throw this away for you. Oh, that's pretty fantastic. I'm gonna make a hard turn here because
go for it.
We dipped into it in terms of sort of being on your own and not on your own in terms of being abandoned, but like your as far as supporting yourself and taking care of yourself, where does your pursuit of family begin? Like with your partner, and and when did that happen? And because I know a little bit of it, but I probably forgot a lot of it, and but I know that happened fairly early, right?
Yeah. Again, one of those little magical Stardust moments was, I was in 7th grade in history class, and I fell asleep, and I had a dream, and I saw my wife. I saw this woman who was on this bluff overlooking the ocean, and I knew exactly what she looked like and what she was wearing, and the angle at which she was looking at the ocean to where I was. And I was like, and I woke up, and I had this very clear premonition of who my wife was. And then flash forward to, I was in 12th grade, and I'm sitting there talking with my best friend, Jackson. Hilarious. Which I'll fill you in. I'll fill you in on the Jackson story with regards to SOA too. That's hilarious.
That's very fun.
But I'm sitting there talking, I hear somebody's voice behind me talking to somebody else. I turn around and I look at my wife. And I turn back to Jackson, and he's looking at me like this, and he always goes, "Man, your face was fucking white." and he goes, "What?" And I go, That's my wife." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, That's my wife."
You know how crazy that sounds? Like for me, like senior in high school, and your best friend going,
yes.
Yeah.
And I walked, and my mother was picking me up from school, and I got in the car, and she's like, "You okay?" And I was like, "I just saw my wife." And she goes, "Oh, okay." It's like, and then I would see her around school, and I couldn't
Yeah.
couldn't anything. And then one day I was in the theater department and I turn around and she like sticks out her hand and she was like, "Hi, I'm Molly." And I was like, "Hi, you know," and I mean,
you just go, "You're my wife."
Exactly.
You're my wife.
It's the same thing. I have the School of Rock DVD. You know, I was like, "You're my wife.
You marry me."
That's what she must have done. So it goes. You know, we sort of get to know each other, and then I finally asked her out on a date, and it was the first date that I'd ever really been on, and I asked a friend of mine, I go like, I don't know where to take her. Like, where do we go? And he goes, "Oh, well, there's this restaurant that you should take her to." And I said, "Okay." I said, "What do I do after that?" And he said, and he gave me this address, and again, before the internet and all that stuff. And he said, there's this little park in the Palisades. Just take her there. And I was like, "Okay." And so we go to this restaurant, and I'm driving. I've never been to this park before. And I go up into the Palisades, and it's so crazy. It's like there's these like, you know, $20 million houses on the bluffs looking over, and there's this park overlooking the bluffs. And I was like, this is what was in my fucking dream. And I was like, so I took her there, and that was our first date, you know, and then we stayed together. And 11 years later, I proposed there. And again, like the cherry on top was when I proposed, there was a guy who was at the park and saw us. This guy the big guy, kind of looked like Santa Claus with this big white beard, who took a Polaroid of me proposing, and he comes over and he goes, "Here you go," and walked away. And I was like, and I look at it, and it was from the angle that I saw in my dream.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
And so I still have it, and I have it framed, and it's gnarly.
At what point did you tell her about the dream in the relationship?
It took me a long time.
Yeah.
Probably 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know,
11 years, that's a long courtship.
Yeah. Well, because for a long time she said that getting actually hitched wasn't important to her until all of her friends started getting hitched. And then she was like, "I think I want one." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. Oh, I see. So it was like, it was more like she didn't need that.
Yeah. We felt,
right.
You know, we felt like this really, really quickly. Yeah. And again, there's these wonderful little magical moments. It was during our wedding. We had the ceremony. We did it at the Greystone Estate.
Oh, yeah.
And after the ceremony, people go like, "Oh my God, that was so amazing. Can you believe that happened?" And we're like, What are you talking about?" They go, they go, "Watch the video of the wedding." I'm like, "What part?" They're like, "When you guys kiss." And we were like, "Oh, okay." It was gnarly. It was like, we're there outside, you know, they do the whole ceremony. You may kiss the bride, like that. No wind, no wind at all. We kiss, and this big burst of air comes. Her veil is standing up like this. I had no idea. And I watched it, and I was like, "What the fuck?" So yeah. But I'll tell you the Jackson. Here's the Jackson SOA story real quick.
Okay.
So I got the script for SOA. I read it, and I was like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, Jax is the only good character. And I was like, they already have a person for Jax. And so my friend Jackson is Stephen Wright meets Andy Kaufman. I've known him my entire life, and I can never tell what the fuck is going to come out of this guy's mouth. And that's why I absolutely love him. He's just playing by a totally different deck of cards. And my manager's like, "You sure you don't want to?" And I'm just like, "No, Jackson's the only part that I want to." And he goes, and Jackson was there like looking at the script while I'm talking to my manager. And he goes, he goes, but you're not Jax. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you're the best friend of Jax. And I go, yeah? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, so I should go? And he goes, it's up to you. I was like, okay. And that's why I initially went.
You took ownership.
You're not Jax.
Yeah.
You're not a Jax, man.
Yeah.
I was like, you're the best friend of Jax.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So now so you're with Molly.
Yeah.
And I know this, but you now, I know there's it's interesting. My path to children was when I fell in love with Kate and we moved forward, she came with, that was part of the package, right?
Yeah.
And, so I went, and look, I sort of had, I was still, I was still raising myself, you know what I mean? Sure. And quite selfishly, really never thought of myself as having kids, and nor did I particularly think that maybe that it was a good idea for there to be a progeny of myself. Okay. So, but I was sort of like but it wasn't until and some of it. Look, growing up, there was a lot of the trauma was was not self-inflicted, but it was to do with shit that was going on with me, and but I never really saw the weight of a perhaps strong, loving, maternal bond, right?
Yeah.
And Kate was a single mom, and I saw her relationship with Sarah and Jackson, and I was like, oh, that's what it is. Uh-huh. And I was like, well, if I could do it like that,
yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we began the, and a lot of it was, like Kate was like, look, if we're gonna do this, like she had a partial hysterectomy at that point, so she knew she couldn't carry. Uh-huh. So we'd have to, there would be some science involved, and we needed to rent an oven, and so it was a process, and she was like, if we're gonna do it,
right.
So at what point did you, because I know you've been on several journeys in your life, and of self-awareness, and what point did that become, a priority for you?
Yeah, for better or worse, it was a priority real early on for me. I was 21, maybe, and I knew that children were going to be very, very important to me. Molly, less so. She was on her own sort of thing. She was like, we'll kind of get to it when we get to it. And but children for me, or the feeling of family, was really vitally important to me. So when we started to try, and we had a lot of trouble for 12 years, it was heartbreaking. At the same time, there was, because we were doing IVF, and it was harder for her than it was for me. But because I kind of was, at the end of the day, I was like, well, we're not going to stop until the baby's here. We know that that's going to happen. Right. It's just a matter of, how many times we have to go through this. But it was always, to be frank, it's always been my main thing is the idea of being a father has always been the only thing that I feel like I'm really here on this planet to do.
Oh, wow.
is anything else is just doesn't, they're dimensions different. It's one is 2-dimensional and one is 4-dimensional. It's is the weight of sort of being a guiding, supportive force in somebody else's life for them to become the best version of whatever it is they are, and for the onus of dealing with all of your own expectations and protecting them from that, and just being, the idea of being sort of a, like the sun, is that the sun never goes, "Hey, what did you do for me lately?" Is that the sun is just there to beam on the thing and let it grow. That's always been, the sort of great work, the mission that I've always felt, very, very, very close to, is, and I feel like I get a lot of that from my mother,
right.
is this just this limitless feeling of that you can continue to draw from somewhere else, something that's much bigger than you, and let it just pass through you to somebody else. But to do that with a child is kind of what was always my biggest desire, the biggest want that I had. It's like the legacy that you leave, most hopefully too, as unrecognizable to them.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't is not like you don't want to take any credit.
Right.
Is
no, I adhere to that as well.
Yeah.
And it's such a generational quest, if you will. Like when I think about how Kate and I have because I've raised Sarah and Jackson since they were 4 and 6, and they're like full-grown human beings, and as is Esme now, almost 18, and fuck. But like we always, we've been. I've done it imperfectly, obviously, but there's always, I knew for me, the one thing that I desperately, like I remember when Esme was born, telling her, I promise I'm going to do everything in my power, like, not to fuck you up, right? And because I was raised with with fear and shame as being the bumpers, right? And that I was not going to do that, as was Kate, right? So, it was really about having them grow up in an atmosphere, no matter how many mistakes we made, that, they were loved and they were perfect, right? And that no matter how mad we might be, or how that none of that would ever go away, right? And so I feel if you're able to do that and really instill that in a child, no matter what challenges they may have, and they've all had their own challenges, that there's a sense of them being able to push through, because on a cellular level, they are safe, no matter whatever their anxieties are underneath it. And, and it is, and I've had to, as it sounds like to a certain extent for yourself, like I've had to build that platform myself. And if you can give a kid that platform for for them to already have when they start on their journey, it's that's half the game, right?
It's more than half the game.
Yeah.
Is that foundation of? I love the way that you put it though too. Is that they're loved and that they're perfect. Is if that's the base layer, if that's the default, if the default emotional state is existing in a state of self-love. Mm-hmm. They're never going to, it's impossible for them to stray too far, regardless of whatever, challenges that they meet. Is that foundation is not cracked. That foundation is something that can only be built upon. Mm-hmm. That's all of the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and that is, and look, and I know it sounds like rhetoric to say, oh, my parents did the best they could. And,
right.
And the truth is they really did, right? Like they did not, they didn't have the kit of tools that I was able to pick up, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't there for either one of them.
Yeah.
And, and obviously growing up in times of desperate, lack, as they both did, so, they weren't given, even though I had my own challenges growing up, I ultimately had at my disposal the opportunity to go, oh, if I choose to, I can grow this way. Right. I can, oh, wait a minute. I am a seeker, right? Uh-huh. That is my, and I can pick that up and learn these tools and move down that path and become that guy, right? And they just, those road signs weren't there for them, right? And they were, for myself and I believe for Kate, so as you, and what's your daughter's name?
Ellie.
Yeah. As you raise Ellie, what are those street signs or whatever you want to, like, what are those things, that you are able to go, okay, this is the direction I want to head in here, or is that too esoteric?
No, I like it. That's good. The thing for me, like, I guess one of I remember being in like right around the time when family became really important to me was I was watching people, in my 20s, friends of mine who had started to get pregnant and stuff, and I just saw everybody saying the same thing that everybody's heard to some degree, is people go like, I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be like my father. And I was like, and I just kept hearing it, and it was like a natural thing to say, but there was some part of my brain that was whispering like, okay, but what do you want to be? Right. And if you're not super fucking clear on that, guess what? You're going to manifest, so it was like, okay, it's just as valuable of, walking into a grocery store and going like, I don't want avocados. It's like, that doesn't, you don't have a grocery list. Right. It's like, put together the list. So for, 20 some odd years, as I was really kind of saying like, how can I stack the deck as best I can in the favor of my child, even before they're here? It's like, what do I want this to be for them in a way that's not, not making up for what I wasn't given or but is I guess where I landed was, everybody goes, I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be like my father. And then some people go, I want to do it like this. And then the other end of the spectrum is, what does my daughter want me to be? Is this sovereign entity, that's coming here, that I'm supposed to support? It has an influence on me too. What's the best version that she wants, and can I provide that organically? So I kind of let that be the guidepost. And I remember real early on in Molly's pregnancy, one of my spiritual teachers, whose name is Tej, she goes, who's like this 70-year-old lady. She's like this tall, and she's like Yoda. She's like she's like a Zen master. She's really, really, really harsh, and that's why I love her and she's my teacher. But she goes, I'm just letting you know, there's a very high possibility that your daughter is going to be a lot older than you. I was like, good. I was like, I don't need a newbie. I was like, let her lead the way.
Right.
So I've kind of leaned into that, and it's true. My daughter, the kind of awareness that this child has, I just kind of go,
Right.
you know, is I'm just trying to be there for that, is whatever higher nature that she has that she's bringing in here, I let that be the guiding force.
Right.
I remember, I stay in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's I whenever the beautiful thing that happens with me and Esme now is like she as painful as my childhood was growing up and being, we both have, we've shared the agony of the of being overweight when we were young,
Yeah,
right?
man.
And so as but as painful as that was for me, I was always, and this is the part of the agony of it, was I just had self-awareness, right?
Uh-huh.
And she is like, her level of self-awareness as far as what her challenges are, is I watch it and I've seen them manifest, and what it's created is this individual who is so aware of, and when I say challenges, it's just understanding, how she needs to learn, understanding the level of support she might need on a particular thing, and I look at that, and I think it's one of those things where even if I wanted to, I couldn't take credit for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I look at that shit and I go, man, that's, like you can't learn that. Meaning like it can manifest
Right.
and find ways to come out.
Right.
But I'm realizing that some of her challenges was able to sort of tap into that in a way that I couldn't, right? Like I didn't have the resources that we've been able to provide for her to have her take those challenges and have it manifest into a sense of knowing what she needs to take care of herself, right? And in that, for me, it was like, oh, that's, and when I'm talking about that platform of that's what that's been able to give her, is that sense of being aware of what I say challenges, and it's not weakness. It's like just knowing, like, okay, this is how I move forward in this circumstance, and look, she's a kid, so it's not like she's not bumping into shit and making mistakes and reaching too far and blah blah blah. But like, here's a perfect example.
Yeah.
She just got her license, right?
Yeah. Oh, she got it.
She got it. She passed. She passed the second time, and prepared no, she's a kid who. Her anxiety, she attacks her anxiety.
Okay.
Like she doesn't run from it. And, because it's like she can't hold it.
Yep.
And rather than, she can't pretend it's not there.
Yep.
The only way she can get through it is to go through it. Right.
Yep.
So she's like, now I have my license, I want to go and I'm going to drive. And we're like, right. And we're like, well, let's start slow. And she's like, all right. So that weekend, we were like, all right, why don't you go down to Starbucks and grab a coffee or a snack, and and she drove to Starbucks, which is 5 minutes from our house.
Yeah.
And it was the first time she was in the car by herself.
Yeah.
With nobody else, nobody watching.
Yeah.
Tethered to no one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a whole different experience. And she was like, oh, this is why they were so concerned.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she comes back, and I was up here, but Kate was home. She was like, "How was it?" She goes, "It was okay, but there was a couple things like I didn't quite know what lane I was supposed to get into, and when I went there, I parked, and I realized I was in 3 spots, and
right,
and so it was like her awareness of like, oh, okay, so now what we'll do is if she has to go someplace she's never been to, we'll essentially shadow her, right? So she knows we're there,
Yeah.
and and if she's still not comfortable, she'll ask for us to do it again.
That's great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like to me, if I could, being able to give her that is like, oh shit, that's like, that's actual shit that she's going to be able to put in her pocket and walk on.
Yeah.
Right.
And also feeling secure enough in her awareness in herself and also her trust in you guys to know that it's okay to ask for help and when to ask for help.
Absolutely.
That's the biggie.
And that's the thing, I don't know about you, but that's the thing. I didn't learn the phrase "I don't know" until I was sober in my 30s.
Got it. Yeah,
because I was afraid to. Every time somebody said something, I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Right.
Because I was terrified not to know
Right.
something.
Right.
And she'll be the she's she has no investment in not having the truth.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
What the fuck was that about? I didn't know what it was until I was almost 40.
Yeah, of course.
Now, this is, I think it's pie time.
Okay.
And then here's what I want to do with us at Pie. We usually talk about projects and blah, 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 blah. I want to talk about the one constant barrage I get from SOA fans is, why'd you kill Opie?
Yeah.
I mean, and to a terrifying degree,
Awesome.
But I'm going to give you my hit on it,
Okay.
and then I want to hear your hit.
Okay.
On it. First, tell me about your pie choice and what do we have here and why?
I think this. Well, my original was Boston cream. I was like, go for Boston cream. I was like, I like that.
Couldn't get it?
Couldn't get it. And then I was like, I've never had it, but I'd love to try it. I'd love to try rhubarb with cheddar cheese on top because I've always seen that in the South. And I was like, I've never had that, so maybe that's my favorite. And then so we landed on sour cherry, and then I brought you some cake that we made.
Can we get that going too?
Yeah.
So this is sour
cherry.
Sour cherry. Have you had sour cherry?
No.
Oh, really? My pie?
Okay.
Well, it's pretty good. We had I've had a couple. What was it? It was it was Rainn Wilson who turned me on to Marionberry. Have you ever had? Yeah. Have you ever had Marionberry?
No, I haven't. I've heard of it though.
And his first choice was rhubarb without the strawberry. Like you can't get rhubarb with just rhubarb because I guess it's too bitter or something. You can only get it with strawberry.
Got it.
And we couldn't find that even in LA. But then we got Marionberry, which was a little not bitter, but it wasn't. It was a little like Odie. Almost.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Got
it was, but it was that was a new one.
I'm very good friends with Rainn.
Are you really?
In the strangest of ways. And we've run into.
Actually, that makes perfect sense to me. Learning about who that cat is.
Yeah, it's weird. We have these orbits that kind of come and, I remember it was right after SOA, after I was done. He had I think they did a pilot. I don't remember if they made it. He had a spinoff that was just going to be the Dwight's show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I went in and tested 3 times. And it came down to me and somebody else to play his brother. And it was an absolute blast because they were these long, 45-hour-long sessions. And we were improvising just like the entire time. We had a blast. And I guess he wanted me, but the network wanted somebody else, so they went with somebody else. But the show didn't go. But So every time we run into each other, he's like, "Hey, brother." And then, strange enough, was he texted me maybe, right before I came up here at like 3:00 in the morning. I was like, "What the fuck?" And he was texting me from Amritsar, from the Punjab, from the Golden Temple, and I was just like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "This is your jam, right?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What?" It's 3:00 in the morning. He's like, "Oh, talk to you later."
No, I was, like I knew him a little bit because he's buddies with Rich Roll, who's a friend of mine, and I knew he was, he was a fairly enlightened cat with all of that, and hey Patrick, can you grab me another one? And but it was no, that was I think he might have been, was he our first? Was Ryan our first?
No,
second one, and but yeah, that we had a lot of fun. So tell me what this is. Who made this? Is this
Me and my
Molly's?
wife made this.
Wow.
It's just kind of a white cake, but it's like really light, and there's pudding in the middle, and then we kind of mix the icing with whipped cream, so it's really sort of light. And one of the things my wife always says when she makes is,
That was great.
She prays over the food.
When Paris was on, of course, Paris broke the rules.
What did he do?
Because he was like, "I don't eat pie. I eat cake." I'm like, "All right, dude, bring cake. We'll get."
Well, wasn't I was watching the episode with you and Rain, and I remember it was like, what, your first or second episode, right?
Yeah, it was.
And then he was like, "Yeah, just a note, you can't eat the pie on that." And you guys were like, oh. I was like,
whoa.
I was like, "Screw you!
Yeah.
This is ASMR."
But I remember when we were explaining it, and we're like, "Yeah, this is what we're going to do." So we dove right in. We're like, "So, you're up," and he's like, "Oh, we are doing that. Okay." And I'm just like, he's like so blunt and beautiful. And I remember being into the first 10 minutes of that, and I'm going, this could go off the rails, right? And then like within 20 minutes, and I was like, I fucking love this guy.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Do you know what I mean?
He's amazing.
And I think he knows, and then I realized, oh, you like to lead with "this is going off the rails."
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, because Paris, and it was actually kind of sweet. It was a simple sort of Duncan Hines mix that he grew up in, that his mom would always make.
Oh, that's
that
nice.
he still, like, to this day, it's like his favorite.
Oh, I love that.
So
I love that.
I couldn't shut it down.
Yeah.
Not that I would anyway. So when people ask me, and there's this, when people ask me, I mean, still, dude, I will get comments or DMs that, like either, that either people send to me because I don't, I've learned at a very early stage in this, and trying to relay that to my children that no, never, don't read the comments. Never read the comments. But it's, to this day, I will get, like death threats for killing Opie, right? And this is how I remember it.
Yeah.
Is that the bond, well, and here's what I'll tell people that some people know, some people don't. The people who care know this, is that, you had a 1-year contract. That from, in the original conceit that Opie was supposed to be the one who died in the first season's finale, and to sort of send Jax on that trajectory. And it was one of those things, two things happened. One is you realize that that I needed more time to tell that story.
Right.
And that to have that break that early, is may not serve us. And then the other thing was just the chemistry between you and Charlie, right? Like it was really, and knowing who now, obviously knowing both of you as human beings, and a little bit of what and where you came from. it makes complete sense to me, right?
Right.
The depth of that. And Sprague took the bullet.
Yeah.
Sprague Grayson, who I.
It was also, I felt like it sort of evolved itself, was that change of real early on of making Piney into Opie's.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden, that
Right.
changed the dynamic of everything that was going on.
I remember that because initially that wasn't the deal.
Yeah.
And then in research, realizing that it was very much a generational thing.
Yeah.
Like there was, in just in just the club that was my main source of research. In the one charter up north, there was a history of father-son dynamics within the club, and I thought, oh, that's a really, that's that greater theme already.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen, but let's throw that into the mix, and that that added a depth to that connection, and the two of you coming up in this life together, right?
Yeah.
So, and then as we continued down that trajectory, and it was ultimately leading to that point for Jax, which the idea that can you think that deeply and be that self-aware and still be part of that life? Like, how do you manage what you have to do with what perhaps your greater nature is?
Right.
And I believe that was his dad's dilemma. That was never the idea of the club.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be something much more open, right? And through circumstances, it became what it became, and became his perhaps burden, and to the point where his vision became a threat. And how does Jax avoid that, or how does he, and so leading down that path of the nature of the world, and in the process of doing that, it meant circumstances that took out your wife, and you feeling perhaps maybe the club didn't necessarily understand the weight of that for you. And then with your dad, with Piney going away, and it got to the point for me where I didn't know how to organically bring this character that the level of depth and strength and perhaps awareness that you brought to that character. It got to the point where I didn't know how that guy sat in the room with any of them anymore, including Jax, right? Yeah. So what had happened was it became more difficult for me to include you, that character, in the arcs of the greater arcs of the show. And I think for you as an actor, you were so plugged in integral, and as the character became a bit of a satellite, the actor became a bit of a satellite. And I think it was a struggle for you to suddenly not contribute in the way that you were originally contributing. It was like it was sort of like I took some of it away, right? And I could feel that in you, and as I was struggling, I was like, well, how do I organically do that? I can't like suddenly, pull some bullshit move and pretend that none of that happened. There was a pitch. Maybe he goes, whatchamacallit, not when you go,
not lone wolf. I know what you mean.
When you go, you essentially, you become a bit of a satellite in terms of the club. You're still a member. Oh God, they're going to give me shit for forgetting that.
I know the word you're looking for.
Exactly. So anyhow, and I thought, well, that, but then I'm like, well, that presents the same, like, how do we, does that mean like he's out there and we know he's out there and like, you know, like that was easy to do with Wendy's character,
right.
To know that she was fucked up and found her and that all that was going on with her, that didn't necessarily impact what was happening here.
Yeah.
And I was like, it all felt like bullshit.
Yep.
And then it was like, and quite honestly, it was like, all right, you know, how do I give this guy, how do I bring him to a conclusion in a way that not only changes the course of Jax, but changes the course of the mythology, right? And that ultimately was the reason for the timing of the death and giving not just you, the actor, this walk away, if you will, but giving the character this sense of, oh, I can go out in a way where I know even with everything that's happened, there are 3 dudes over there who I do love and I actually do care about. And this is how I contribute, even if it's just for them, even if it's just for Jax. This is how I can go out, you know, in terms of, for me as a writer this is, I am serving this character.
Absolutely.
I am taking this is an organic turn, and you know, in the world we've created, in the circumstances we've created, in the things that I've brought to it, in the things that you've brought to it, this all makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
So that was, you know, that became the evolution of it. But some of it definitely was like, you know, and look, I'm not going to go down the Johnny Lewis route because that's a whole other show.
Sure.
But to a certain degree, a lot of that happened with that character as well, is being a prospect. Right. Organically, he couldn't be at the, you know, there was a sense of him being removed. Right. Yeah. And, but I knew, there was less to write for you because there was less for Opie to be engaged in because of the world and the circumstances and the betrayal that has happened. Like, I just, to have you and Clay at a table just was like, how do you do that without, you know what I mean? For either character. So that was my experience of it.
I've two experiences. One, I feel like you're exactly right from the actor standpoint. From again, like in all transparency, like, you know, all actors, when they are 4 years into a show, it's like the 7-year itch. Everybody starts to go, I need more money. I don't get enough stuff. It's just what happens. Right. And that was my first time going through that. Right. You know, so I was definitely navigating that. You know, if you ever want a nightmare, I remember I was emailing you about this, and some of my old emails from Sons popped up on my mail thing. I was just like, oh God, do I read this? And I was reading it, and I was just like, and I was reading my emails to you, and I was going, oh, just shut the fuck. I was like, and I spent a good 45 minutes like reading the next one. Like, oh, fucking
just torturing yourself.
Like, what are you doing? So there was definitely that part of it, which was just the maturing process of me.
Right. Because that was the longest time you'd ever been on a series, right?
Yeah, big time. Outside of that, especially in retrospect, it's a fucking perfect move for that. It's because everyone asking that question, why did you, is why it works.
That's interesting.
That's what you want as a writer. That's what you want as an actor. It was the perfect evolution of that character in relation to his own story, but also to the in service of Jax's, evolution to where you took him. It works perfectly, and also just from the actor's standpoint, it's like that's the stuff you dream about. Right, is to have a fucking a death scene that rips everybody's hearts out. Mm-hmm. It's like besides the fact, for me, like again on one of those sort of like zoom out universal levels, is my favorite, my favorite movies of all time have been Cool Hand Luke, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These microcosms of men together, where there is some sacrificial character. Right. So when you had him going out, I still remember getting an email from you going, "Just trust me, it's bloody and it's fucking noble." And I was like, "Oh, I think he's right. I haven't even read it yet, but I know this is going to be good." Right. And then it was just executed perfectly. There was nowhere else to take the character. Mm-hmm. I remember afterwards, I was like, as a viewer, I was kind of going, the only other thing that I ever saw that was didn't contribute to anything, especially from where you took Jax, is I was like, do you want to see half of a season where Jax and Opie are fucking enemies? Like, I might want to watch that, but it doesn't contribute to the long form trajectory of
right of taking them.
And it also doesn't. But it's like, but then what? So then they're enemies, and they're back together, and then it still doesn't answer the question of how does he sit at the table with Clay and everybody else. Right. It's taken out right where he needs to be taken out. Right. And I can't thank you enough for. That's one of those. Just as an actor, you pray for those moments. Right. Is to be able to know that everybody's going, oh my fucking, it's better than that than than people going like, thank God that guy's.
Well, that's interesting you saying that as I lament about it, because I am, I was like, I know, I'm sorry, but like the fact that people actually take the time to go, why'd you do that?
Fucking right.
And it means perhaps maybe it was,
it was letter perfect. Yeah. It was letter perfect. It really, really was,
because here's the thing. It's like, there was never anybody who was like, I can't believe you did that. I've stopped watching.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe for like, maybe for a week.
Right.
But no, dude, that's I appreciate that. And
it's the truth. Yeah. It is like you couldn't pay me enough money to be able to change it any differently. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It was. I remember when I watched it. It reinformed to me the operatic nature of the show.
Right.
Is that just like Godfather is that there's this spectacle bloody,
there's a heightened
romanticized.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my whole thing is how do I, being a love of the absurd and Artaud and the highly influenced by the absurdist. It's like, how do I run right up to that line? Come on, just hang over and yet still be on this side of maybe that,
right.
Is, that's, to me, that's the most fun. Like, no matter what genre you're in, what we're trying to do here too, right? I mean, I'm right up to that line in a couple things. And some people are like, and other people are like, what the fuck is happening to me right now? And I have to admit, that's the most fun to watch. But I love you so much.
I love you, brother.
And the fact that you are here in this on this journey, and we were just talking beforehand how it does feel like I've been on the Oregon Trail, and I just came out of an ambush, and but the fact that I have cats like you and Michael Ornstein and and new friends, man. Lena's been just a soulful, beautiful person to work with, and I have a lot of touchstones on. And whether I do it consciously or unconsciously, I don't know. But I'm so grateful, and it's so much fun to work with you, and keep those emails coming, my friend.
Good, brother.
I do. I adore you. I love you. And,
I love you, man.